We're in Seoul for Korea Blockchain Week, and today I'm with Yoan from Wintermute.
Hi there, how are
Hi.
you, Mia?
Welcome. It's the second time we're having a conversation, and last time we were in Bangkok. I would love to start with a question. How does the market look like in Korea versus Thailand, to you specifically?
It's a very specific question. Korea is a very difficult, I mean, if you want to say like big and small and so on, so Korea is a much bigger market. Thailand is about like $100 million a day of volumes. A lot of stablecoin versus fiat essentially, and then a bit of BTC, a bit of ETH, a bit of Ripple. It's much more diverse here, very concentrated on a bit, as you know. It's a it's still an impossible market for us to get in because there's FX controls, very difficult. There's no corporate accounts at the exchanges, and it's difficult to get actually the links between each of the exchanges and the banks. So each exchange, each local Korean exchange has like a special relationship with a different bank.
Okay.
So that's it's like the most frustrating part of the market here. So actually, Thailand, we could enter the market. Actually, exchanges can onboard non-local trading firms, but it's kind of on the small side for us to do business there yet. So what we do with Korea is we tend to actually help Korean teams outside of Korea, and we can invest. It just takes a bit of time. So we invest here and there in teams. So they have a good pool of talent. I would say there's a good side of like what Luna brought is that there was more investments in the ecosystem. So there's a good amount of like more Cosmos related talent. It's more kind of Solana related these days. I think I see it's getting a bit more traction. Here you see specific ecosystems for Aptos and Sui,
Yeah.
a bit like in Japan. A lot of IP related, gaming related projects that we don't necessarily interact with much more than just beyond market making. So we can help them with market making,
Yeah.
but we can't really help them with like investing. We don't really invest in gaming per se. So two big differences in terms of sizes and in terms of access.
How does it look like compared to like the rest of Asia? Because you have a really good overview of the market here.
So I don't know if we discussed Japan last time, but Japan is like smaller than here, but easier to access to a degree. Much slower moving. Getting the right hires is really key. Talking to the right lawyers, getting the right framework, and it's a very, very different market as well. So I think here's a bit more balanced. So a lot more the retail and exchange market. Well, actually in Japan, it's more of a broker's market. The GMO, the Rakuten, people essentially accumulating card points. So like Rakuten has this point system where essentially you accumulate BTC points.
Okay.
And then you can exchange them and so on. The dream for most trading firms, actually for Japan, is that the Watanabe-san, sort of the Japanese housewives who trade and basically manage the family budget, and then trade on FX and so on, and then actually some of that flow actually goes into crypto. So
That's interesting.
that's the dream for most people. It's not there yet. It's quite strict in how much which tokens can be listed on exchanges, and they're also very strict with leverage. So there's a very different habit, I would say, in between people trading in Japan, where I think it's just limited to 2x now. They're trying to bring it up to about 5x. To be honest, I think most people should be capped at like 7x, like in equities. But it actually leads us some interesting things here in Korea, where most people can only trade spot in Korean exchanges. But we've seen that with FTX, with a huge proportion of assets and Korean users that were on FTX. They do like to gamble to a degree, so they like the 50x more than the 1x.
How does the gambling level here compares to say like Hong Kong?
I think it's more.
It's more.
I think it's more, and the sad part of it, and I think the sad part of it, is that there's a certain level of like depression around like the opportunities as a young person to do well in life, essentially. So in terms of like getting a car, getting a house, and so on. So a lot of people like get into debt, essentially, and one way to try to get out of this is just to essentially to gamble. So that's I give that example a few times, but Aptos became quite popular here thanks to the ticker, the APT ticker, because you know what it means. It's APT corresponds to apata in Korean, which means apartment. So people were gambling, trading Aptos, hoping to make enough money to buy an apartment.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
So it's a good ticket for them. It's yeah, it's a bit like, so that's the downside of it, I would say. It's a country that doesn't have a whole lot of immigration as such. So a lot of young people actually do typically the jobs that in most Western countries we would see immigrants taking, which is fine. But it's just, I think we see some more prevention, more habits in people gambling essentially.
Do you think that crypto will help that in some way?
It should, because there's an open system for entrepreneurs, people to build. So it should.
Yeah.
It should. It depends how serious people are about just building, and then hopefully not trying to take shortcuts. So yeah, it does. I mean, it can help. I think we see a lot of the Korean talent to extract themselves from Korea essentially. So we see them in Singapore, we see them in Dubai and other places. So they are there. But talking about Japan earlier, like Korea and Japan really suffer from having too few entrepreneurs per 1,000 people. Japan has actually been a bit more friendly, just thinking of getting essentially entrepreneurs visas.
Okay.
But I haven't heard of this in Korea.
So which one are you more optimistic on? Which region out of all?
In terms of being able to do business,
Yeah.
Japan. But in terms of it's essentially a political decision here. So in terms of genuine optionality or very much growth potential,
Yeah.
There's more growth potential here.
Here. I see. I've heard a lot of people here saying that people are just more involved in crypto. They actually use it. There's more active users. I interviewed quite a few people at the conference, and they say that they have a huge percentage of their users are actually from here, which I found really interesting. How are things looking in Singapore?
It's quite good. It's quite a nice little sort of Switzerland of Asia.
Okay.
I do want to add. I'll double click on what you said though on having a lot of users here, especially IP or sports. I know Alex at Chili's always says that actually his biggest community is in Korea. There's a few of these. I think I was talking to Paul at the PSG, for example. A huge community here.
Yeah.
So they're just very active as well. So that just a few notes on this. But Singapore. Nowadays, I'm already asking for PR. I wouldn't live anywhere else.
Yeah.
I think some people find it small, maybe because they don't travel as much as I do.
Yeah.
It's quite a nice environment. I know. I mean, they really try to push more digitalization of the crypto space there, so it's good. There's a few firms that have got essentially a local stablecoin. We have a few competitors who decided to do their OTC from Singapore. So we tend to do our OTC from London, so we have C registered there. But we have a few competitors that got essentially a payment license equivalent locally and then operate with that. So there's good progress. There's some clarity on what can be done, what can't be done. So it's good. It remains Singapore, which means that there's a good amount of money there. There's a lot of funds and so on. There are less builders. You just find if you really want to invest in teams, you're just going to find them in Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, and so on. In other geographies, but not that much in Singapore. In Singapore, you'll find actually later stage teams the Paradigm of the World, Avo, and so on, with a few local Singaporeans who are building there as well. But that's just the one downside. But it's a hub as well, so it's just easy to travel around.
Last time I was there, I met a few Russian women that married people in Singapore, and they're actually doing what you were just saying, in Japan, the wives would do. They actually use crypto. I don't know if every day, but they use it to make payments in Russia and so on. So I found it incredible because these people are not necessarily in the industry. They use the exchanges and they use it actively. They could explain it to other. This was a dinner during F1, and she was essentially explaining how she has taught some other Russian women there how to do it, and now they all do it.
The payments are international transfers is a huge use case.
Yeah.
So you could see that with Lebanon for many years when they had they basically debased their own currencies, and then people could actually still keep a certain level with just sending USDT. Actually, it's one of the successes of Tron, USDT on Tron to actually send money to Lebanon, and then that worked well for many years. I don't know if it works as well to date, but it was quite a success story as such in terms of international transfers. For payments, we see that, but it's sometimes a bit hard on the fiat off ramp.
Yeah.
But I think it's still a big use case for the crypto space. Like we're looking at a few investments that are relating to that. They're relating to funding and making it smoother and cheaper to send funds across different countries. Because essentially remittance still costs between 6 and 20% fees, and it's a bit of like a balance sheet problem. And people want to be able to, if you send money from here, they want to some family, friends, maybe in the Philippines, maybe in Indonesia, to receive it directly. And the cost of funding is actually quite high still, or actually few people can do it.
Yeah.
With the balance sheet. So there's a good amount of like good crypto use cases there.
You have the offices in London, and I wonder, like, because for me, like, Europe has been like quietly, like, it feels like they're fading in the background.
Yeah, I mean, a few weeks ago, I was quite scared of being a French citizen, being not very happy to be a French citizen with Pavel's arrest. I find this very, very strange from a country that has essentially as part of its motto freedom. That I find very, very strange and disappointing. But beyond that, there's a whole set of things that are a bit scary in Europe. There's a whole asset register. So to give you context, I used to trade rates before crypto, and I used to listen to central bankers and trying to understand what they were saying and how it would impact rates and how it should be positioned. So I would trade options against it and make money based off that. So I was quite used to just listening to the whole bingo card of like all the little keywords that a central banker would use, and then went through the whole I was trading when Lehman happened, when the QE, the first quantitative easing happens, and so on. And then you get a bit, disenchanted from like the so-called experts from the central banks that don't know much more than we do. And then beyond that, I think one of the scary things is, okay, you bail out the banks, and then basically the central banks essentially bail out the banks by keeping the rates at a level where people can afford the debt. The challenge is that you see a trend with asset registers and the way that assets are generally being accounted for in Europe. That implies very much that they want to bail out the central banks themselves, and that means that this doesn't give you like a lot of way out. I think it's just even an EU or a USD backed fiat backed stablecoin even becomes dangerous in itself. So there's questions about how to protect oneself from that. And it's more like, so we were discussing, actually, I was in Bali, I was doing a Nakamoto roundtable, and I was just suggesting that it's been done, but a BTC-backed stablecoin, essentially. So you end up with this, debasing all the time.
I talked with a few people when I went to Paris for Paris Blockchain Week. What repeated, because as I interview people, there's always some kind of repetition depending on the location, the time of the year. What I've repeated a lot there was they basically work alongside with the government, and they're very compliant, obviously. If they want to keep doing business, they have to. I think the issue that could arise from that is essentially like, because we're trying to cause change, like in essence, like crypto is trying to cause change. So if you're very agreeable, let's say, you don't cause much change. You're just like adapting an idea that was here in the beginning, but as you try to comply so much, you end up just doing something.
The tricky thing, so there's a good level of regulation compliance that helps a lot of retail not to lose money and so on. That's really good. So you get the safety net that's positive for the space, and you get some negative sides of it. And the negative sides of it, to give you more context on France, for example, is most French banks were actually part of the state, were stayed on till the 70s or 80s or so. Don't remember the exact days, but actually there was a whole set of like privatization later, and they stayed at a political level and so on. They do stay close to the state, and what you have to keep in mind is that, okay, so there's a bit of understanding between the regulator essentially and the banks, and the banks, we're trying to disrupt their model in many ways. So neobanks were before us trying to disrupt. Crowdfunding was also trying to disrupt, and has disrupted to a degree. But essentially what we face is that there can be some of the downside of regulation, some of the regulation, which is just, some of it is useful, some of it is just a barrier to entry to other people. So it's all like, if you just put the bar so high that it's just only people who have thousands and thousands of compliance officers can actually comply with the rules, then it just stifle very much innovation. So to your point. And then the only answer to that is if you do want to be compliant everything, and we do want to, you just have to make choices in terms of geographies, and you just end up with some regulatory arbitrage essentially. You do have the problem is that we did find we have a big base in London, and we did find that over the years that we do have the best source of hiring and engineers and so on, like being based in London. So we tend to attract very diverse, set of candidates, and we find that it's typically the British universities and so on are quite good. We have a lot of French as well, usually in quant roles, and a whole mix of probably there's 50 plus nationalities to be honest. So it's Europe's there's actually a really good center in terms of hires.
Yeah.
It was really good when we started. It was a really good base to do the first seed Series A kind of rounds. We did get a lot of the later money actually from the US or Asia, because actually there's not a whole ton of VC investing actually in Europe. And now it's a question as you expand, to your point, is like, where do you balance compliance on one side and then sufficient innovation to really disrupt, to disrupt all the industries essentially.
I'll ask you this first. Like, do you think the elections could change how much you'll be doing business in the US, depending how it goes?
We do so little business in the US already.
I know. I think most people tried, whoever was doing a lot of business there reduced it a lot, and whoever wasn't just completely.
I think from so we're 7 years and 2 months old. And then we made a choice from the start of not having a business in the US. We basically have a couple of remote employees there, which have very little substance there. I regularly ask my compliance team, do we need basically we don't have sufficient. We're quite safe in the way that we do a lot of our volume completely outside of the US. So that's a bit of making it making the business a bit more bulletproof on that side. One aspect of it is that it kind of doesn't matter too much what the outcome is. Mm-hmm. I'll quote billions on this. So I don't know if you've seen. I don't know. I haven't finished it, but
I've seen most of it.
I've seen enough of it where there's a Chuck Rose, who basically the lawyer has to make a very hard choice, and then he realizes that actually the worst thing that can happen is maybe not that bad. So if you think of whatever Harris versus Trump as such, it's just like, okay, the worst, maybe perception is like Harris, maybe it's not that bad. It doesn't change things, that much. So I'm not too worried about this. I think it's more for people who want to create things being based in the US. There's actually really good engineering talent there. Okay. That's a bit frustrating for them, but I think it probably just. Everyone is moving east, so
yeah, true.
Just same sort of answer. Then with the regulatory, pressure is just end up with some regulatory arbitrage.
Yeah, the question comes from there's some people, not many, that think that if Trump wins, the regulation might change over time, and it might be a little bit more crypto friendly.
So it would. We heard from. I think it's JP Morgan, another bank that normally has a pretty cold view of crypto. Would probably, if Trump wins, they'll probably start offering and then just doing more in the industry. That's for sure. But that's it's just it's a bit like in trading. So the upside takes care of itself, and then the downside you need to make sure that you limit your downside risk. Mm-hmm. So if it happens, it's great news. But we don't know how fast and exactly how it will be implemented.
So it sounds like it has been like this, and it has become more and more obvious that crypto's hub in the world is in Asia. Mm-hmm. It makes more sense if someone was going to start a company today in crypto, it would make more sense. It'd be safer to just come to Asia and do something here.
Yes, it's a bit more subtle than just Asia. I think it's more like there's still more engineering talent in Europe. Mm-hmm. There's a bit more expertise in Europe, and then you get a mix of Indian, Chinese, and other Asian talents that just mix with European talent to get the best mix. But essentially, the users are in Asia.
Yeah.
So the users, because a lot of use cases in crypto is around trading. Like a lot of the traders are basically in Asia, and we see that with the prominence of essentially most of the large crypto exchanges are where essentially Asia born.
Is there like any trend specific, like in Asia, how people are like in terms of user behavior or what they're interested in?
One thing that comes back and forth like every 3-4 years is that RWA.
Okay.
So we do see that, and then we mentioned Japan earlier. Like you can see with like actually lower local rates and people wanting to have genuine savings, but actually RWA, especially in like a dollar base or so, you can get a high yield. So the yielding stablecoins are interesting to them. So we see some flow there. We see a whole theme about trying to rebuild the whole lending borrowing ecosystem that that was destroyed after 3 arrows and then 3 hours Celsius and Voyager and so on and so on, and FTX had little impact on that, but it was more. Essentially, you had 2022. You had $50 billion of lending that basically left the market. It's reappeared in some way as OTC, but there's no like big platform that's actually lending these days. So only earlier this year we had Gemini getting back their $2 billion dollars of earned product or so. Maybe it's a bit less. But these things just really need to be rebuilt. So there's still a lot of things to do. We see, depending on the geographies, we see a lot of things around IP, gaming, and so on, and entertainment in general, like in IP-heavy countries like Korea and Japan. A bit in Southeast Asia as well. Gaming is more and more prominent in Southeast Asia. It's more like around, the Philippines, Vietnam. I mean, beyond the previous like trend around ETFs and more institutionalization of the market, there's no like clear catalyst these days.
If you were to predict something in terms of how things would evolve, like given like everything you mentioned throughout our conversation, what is something that you're very confident that might happen?
Confident that might happen. I'm always the optimist in the room, so.
This is opinion based, so it's good like if you get it right, but if not, like.
So all the NFA and do your own research, but I would think that the money printing won't stop. So from the central banks, US, Europe, and so on, money printing won't stop, which means that people will be even more keen to just get involved with crypto and hold some of the crypto as a debasing, basically as a hedge for all this money printing. So we'd be optimistic into the pricing,
Okay.
and we show that through in venture, for example, on the venture side of the business, we've got about $200 million of very much long-term investments in the ecosystem. So we take that bet already. So I'll be the optimist in the room. Does it go up in a straight line? Absolutely not.
It'll be up and down.
It's still a 60%, 60% odd volatility asset. So that means that they can easily move 3-4% every day, and it's normal. It's still considered noise when it moves 3-4% today. So I often see on Twitter that people getting panicked, when it goes down like 4%. No, this is actually a normal move for Bitcoin. So like if it goes down to maybe 40K, maybe you should start to question things. But or it moves more than let's say 8% a day. But yeah, in general, it's quite an interesting. It's quite a volatile environment.
One question people ask me often, and I think it's very suitable for these conversations. What part of the cycle are we? Like, how would you label this current time?
I'm hoping we're in late 2020 equivalent. So there's some institutional money that's come in that's quite sticky, and that tends every time things go down a bit, that tends to buy back in a bit more. I think we had some iteration around retail money coming in and out with the whole meme coin, meme coin phase as such. I don't know how long that will stay. There seems to be a habit of people that missed Bitcoin at $100 and now don't want to pay 60K and don't understand they can just buy a fraction of it. So they just want to try and buy like meme coin and try to make a 10 or 100x out of it. Yeah, I think the challenge nowadays is we're missing a bit of a catalyst. So I think maybe some people are just hoping that will, after the elections, that will clear out. But there's no new catalyst. We've had the ETFs, and we're just waiting for the next, phase of building, essentially. Yeah. So I'm hoping that we're somewhere like equivalent of late 2020, and we're just waiting for 2021.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Excited about that. Is there anything exciting coming up for Wintermute?
There's always exciting stuff, but when we in the rocket, it's just basically we're quite focused on executing.
Yeah.
We do more and more incubation. We've got a GMCI, for example, as a JV with the block. So we basically have GM as a play on word with Good Morning, but also global markets indices. So we have a few exchanges and so on that actually started to build the perpetuals on these indices. These indices are essentially like similar to what you have in the traditional finance world, when you have like a basket of, let's say, in our case, L2s, meme coins, gaming tokens, and so on, and just to enable people to get exposure to a certain basket of, certain theme of coins. That's interesting. We see Wildcat grow as well. So Wildcat is a lending borrowing platform that we incubated. That's essentially around fractional lending. So we borrow about $30 million from it, and it is permission DeFi essentially, but it makes it quite fluid in terms of people want to recall their funds essentially, and it's quite interesting. It's in use. So I'm just keen to see how we discussed that essentially there was $50 billion of lending that had disappeared from the market 2 years ago, or nearly 3 years ago. That we just try to replace that, and hopefully with some of it with DeFi. Yeah, we do more and more on the regulator side. So it's more about how do we get a private banker, instead of pitching us like a carbon credit product or some gold related structured product, how do we get more private bankers to pitch to the wealthy of the world like a structured product that's based on Bitcoin or Ethereum.
Yeah.
And then once that happens, then they need to hedge with people like us, and there's a whole trickle down of of value that's been created. So I'm doing, actually on Monday, I'm giving a talk to about 500 private bankers and trying to get them more familiar with the space, and just get everyone involved.
That's amazing. Yeah, hopefully that moves things. For everyone watching, where can they find you?
The best thing you can do is Twitter. So it says Yoann Turpin1, and then 1 as a number. A little PSA actually is that we've noticed that we have a few too many fake employees out there. So just do make sure that when people approach you for market making, for investing and so on, that you do deal with us. So we do a ton of conferences and so on. So just make sure that you come to us. And it doesn't matter if you just come and just say hi, like just to say like, you're real, I'm real. But essentially it's quite a good thing it's quite a good habit to do. And I think that's the problem that will accelerate with AI, and just the fact that, you could take each other's faces and just pretend to be on a call and pretend to be the other person, and just it's just, so it makes it much easier for scammers to do. We've had a few cases where just people have been approached by people who pretended to be Wintermute and they were not. So just be careful there.
Yeah, I've seen a few people on Telegram that have verify me on their bio, and they put the company or like some reference or their email for people to sort of verify that they're actually the right person.
I think the only thing we'll end up with is just a bit more presence on the ground. Just you're gonna have to just go and shake hands with someone before a big deal.
That would be ideal. It's not very scalable, but yeah.
It's not very scalable, but it may have to be their only solution.
It immediately verifies. So, Yoann, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite again.
Hey, what's up?
But it's not something Genzio is afraid of.
If you want to survive, you got to build a hive.
No, we do not understand.
Ladies and gentlemen.
We're back at the Genzio Media House.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today.